promise is community action changes people's lives, embodies the spirit of hope, improves communities, and makes America a better place to live. We care about the entire community, and we are dedicated to helping people help themselves and each other. As we look at the next slide, the other important reference that we want to be sure to ground our conversation in today is the Community Action National Theory of Change. And really the foundation of that theory of change speaks to us as a network mobilizing communities to fight poverty, and that larger goal is upheld by our 3 national goals. And what I would like to say as it relates to our conversation today, and particularly the work of the Learning Communities Resource Center, is that we spend a lot of time focused in the middle section of that theory of change, where you see the various strategies or services that agencies will engage in order to advance those anti-poverty outcomes for families and for communities. And so we offer that, and it very much focuses on the how of what we do, while at the same time we as a network also give great consideration to our performance management system in thinking about the center segment speaks of the what of what we do, and our performance management system more so focuses on the how, but both of those go together is what we want to say. And so with that said, let's now take a moment to look at our agenda for today. We've already engaged in a bit of welcome and introduction. I am pleased to introduce and welcome my wonderful colleague, Ms. Jeannie Chaffin, who will talk a little bit more about the Community Action Economic Mobility Initiative, as she serves as our lead consultant on that work and has really been an important thought partner and designer of this work for our network. And so I'm happy that Jeannie is joining us, and she will say a little bit more a little bit later in our presentation today. Additionally, on our agenda, as I said, she's going to talk about the Community Action Economic Mobility Initiative, provide us with a whole family approach refresher. I will come back and talk a little bit more about the Learning Communities Resource Center overview. We will have a wonderful opportunity to hear from a community action peer from Mid-Iowa Community Action, and then we will talk more about how to apply for the learning community and give you all an opportunity for questions and answers. And so without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce my wonderful colleague, Ms. Jeannie Chaffin. Take it away, Jeannie.
Thank you, Tiffany. It's great to be here with you and with the staff here at the Community Action Partnership talking about this exciting new initiative that the partnership has, and I'm really pleased to be working with all of you in a different capacity these days and providing some leadership and some help designing this initiative that we're going to talk about today. Probably some of you were on the webinar last week where Tiffany and team talked about the Learning Communities Resource Center and the different learning communities that will be available to our network this next year. And we're going to dive a little bit deeper into this Community Action Economic Mobility Initiative, which is a new effort the partnership has that's made possible by a $250,000 grant from the Annie E. Casey Foundation. And like in true community action folks that we are, the partnership is using this resource and combining it with funding from the Office of Community Services for the Learning Community Resource Center and trying to get the most bang for our buck so that we can support the work that you're doing out there in the field. And so what we've done is really design a multi-tiered system of support that'll build the capacity of community action agencies around the country to pursue whole family approaches. And you're going to hear us talk a lot today about whole family approaches. That sometimes is also called two-generation approach. We're using the same model, but we're using this term whole family because we think that it encompasses a lot of what's happening in families today with grandparents raising kids and a focus on the whole family. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but let me sort of give you a high-level overview of this initiative. So when I say a multi-tiered system of support, what we are planning to do is to build on the great work that several community action agencies and pioneers have sort of developed for us, and we're calling those folks the high flyers, and I'll talk more about them in a moment, but that's Community Action Tulsa Community Action Project and Garrett County Community Action in Maryland. And so we have a couple of community action agencies that have really been working for a number of years to develop two-generation approaches in their community action agencies. And then we have Rural Impact, which is an effort of 10 rural organizations across the country to promote two-generation in rural places, and 5 of those sites are community action agencies, and for a number of years they've been sort of piloting and demonstrating how you can shift to a two-gen or whole family approach in rural places. We'll be developing a community of practice, which will be 10 new community action agencies, and they'll be supported, and we'll use a lot of peer learning concepts from the Rural Impact and from the high flyers to support the community of practice. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And then we're going to have a couple of learning communities that maybe you've looked at the materials or heard about last week. And I'll talk more about those learning communities in a moment. And then with everything the partnership does, there's really an opportunity to participate in national webinars and open webinars and conferences. And so there'll be lots of community action agencies, we've kind of estimated here, maybe around 200, that will be learning about whole family approaches too. So that's how it's a multi-tiered system of support. So let me talk a little bit about the kinds of things that we'll be doing here in the initiative. We're going to coordinate learning and content with the integrated services and whole family approach learning communities. We're going to be developing a guide for community action agencies on how to pursue whole family approaches. And then we're going to establish this community of practice, which will have 10 community action agencies. So delving into the community of practice a little bit more, as I said, 10 agencies will be selected for that. Those agencies will get monthly coaching from subject matter experts that will be customized to meet their needs. Like with all the learning communities that the partnership implements, there'll be peer learning webinars and some in-person events at conferences and other meetings. And then there'll also be resources and support to define and refine theories of change that community action agencies may already be pursuing. And then finally, another big piece of this initiative that's really new and I think exciting for everybody in the network on one level is this Community Action Data Interoperability Project. And that project is really going to focus on helping those 10 agencies in the community of practice think about parent, child, and family outcomes and data. So we know that one of the challenges with shifting to a whole family approach is that many agencies have multiple data systems. And so helping agencies to figure out how to bring all that data together is a big challenge, and something that if we can figure out how to do in a few places successfully, that approach can be replicated. So that's also going to be a part of this initiative. So I'm going to stop there. I think we perhaps have have an opportunity for you to type into the chat any questions that you might have. We're going to monitor those as we go through so that we can perhaps address some questions as we're moving along here. So just wanted to flag that if you have questions, please do type those into the chat as we move along. I'm going to be talking about the criteria a little later. I see that we have a question about that. We definitely will make sure that we get to that before we end our time together this afternoon. Okay, so let me talk about the Whole Family Approach Institute, which also is a part of this Community Action Economic Mobility Initiative. This institute we're planning to hold in June, and it will be an opportunity for community action agencies to learn more about shifting to whole family approaches. There are a lot of challenges with that. For example, you may need to think about doing some restructuring of staff to do coordinated case management. There's the data issue I mentioned. And so we're planning on bringing about 30 community action folks together to do some peer support, some learning, help agencies develop some theories of change, and that will be in June, and it will be in conjunction with bringing together our rural impact colleagues. So we're really excited about that. We're working on sponsorships and support for that event right now. We think there'll be a registration of about $300 per person for each team. But we may have some adjustment to that as we move along. So we just wanted to flag that. And I think we have sort of a polling question because we are very interested to know if this sounds interesting and what feedback folks might have about the Institute, even with just a little bit of information I've provided today. So if you wouldn't mind answering the polling question, I'm going to stop for a moment while folks do that. I think you can see there that I did mention that that would probably be held in the Washington, D.C. area, again in June. So let's see, how much time do we have left for the voting? Let's go ahead and get that wrapped up. Okay. All right, so you can see we just got a few seconds left there for voting. And we'll work to get our results here. All right, so we have quite a number, 69 agencies online who said they're interested in the Institute. And we'll be working to get more information out about that. So that helps us gauge what we need to be planning for. So thank you very much for that information. Okay, and then I wanted to just flag when we, as you all have to do when you apply for grants, the partnership has to do a similar kind of thing. And so we have listed here some of the anticipated results for the Economic Mobility Initiative. And we predict that CAAs will realign and restructure programs and systems to enhance outcomes for children and parents. That they'll use new tools which integrate parent and child data. And so I mentioned the data project, which will support agencies in doing that. And then we all know that a lot of this whole family work takes organizations in your community, not just your community action agency, to really move it. And so we expect that some of our community action agencies in the community of practice will catalyze sector community efforts to improve opportunities to support children and parents together. So those are just a few of the results that we expect. So I did want to take a few minutes here because You may be new to this conversation. Perhaps you've been hearing a lot around 2Gen, but I just want to do a little bit of a refresher in case there are questions that folks may be having. The first is sort of why 2Gen or why whole family, and just a little bit of reminder about the scope of child poverty in the United States. You know, more than 1 in 5 children in the U.S. live in poverty, and that's 1.6 million children. And people who were poor for at least 1 year out of 10 during childhood are more than twice as likely to experience poverty in their 30s than people who were never poor during childhood. So that really compels us to focus on children and think about strategies that can really help intervene early in a child's life. Among children raised in the bottom income quintile, 37% were still in the bottom as adults, and 16% made it to the middle, and only 5% made it to the top. And in summary, really, the age when a child experiences poverty and the length makes a big difference to adult outcomes. We also know from neuroscience and new brain science that the impact in the early years really matters. So really focusing on high quality early childhood education makes a difference. And we know that the parents' stress level and their educational attainment and their ability to focus and support their child can make a big difference in the early years too. And many parents living in poverty do a great job of supporting their children, but some parents really need some additional support. So that's sort of the assumptions that we're operating under with 2-generation or whole family approaches. And then the other thing I just wanted to flag is that there's really national momentum around 2-generation, and we've listed on the next slide some of the other national partners that are investing and supporting 2-generation work, and just kind of, you know, giving you a little bit of a quick survey of that. There are many states that have been supported through whether it's the ACF Policy Academy or the National Governors Association, who've really committed to supporting 2Gen too. And the ACF project has focused in Colorado, Connecticut, Maryland, North Carolina, Minnesota, Utah, and Washington. And the NGA project has also focused in Colorado, Georgia, Minnesota, New Jersey, and Oregon. So there's a lot of momentum around 2Gen across the country. Just sort of reinforcing, and many of you who signed on have been thinking about 2Gen and whole family for a while, but just to remind folks that that's really about meeting the needs of children and parents together at the same time and providing high quality services to both parents and children. I'm going to skip over to the Aspen Ascend 2-generation approach slide to just kind of flag that, you know, 2-generation or whole family is a continuum. We often focus on just the children or focus on the parent, but when we focus on both, then we really are talking whole family. And this is this work here and the work on the next slide, which sort of talks about what are the components of 2Gen, are both from colleagues at Ascend at the Aspen Institute who have really done some great work in this space and who we will be engaging as we move forward in our initiative, because we think that you know, it's going to be a great opportunity to have experts like Ascend with us and learning in the community action field. So just, you know, reminding folks here that, you know, the components of the 2-generation whole family approach are not just early education and employment for the parent, but also thinking about social capital and health and well-being and asset development, and that we're really talking sort of to tie into Tiffany's comments earlier about the theory of change. You know, this is a multiple domain effort. We have many domains listed on our National Community Action Theory of Change, and 2Gen really weaves all those domains together. So just going to do another quick poll to sort of get you thinking about where your agency might be with adopting a whole family approach. And so in this little slide, we've got, you know, red as being my agency is interested and we're learning about whole family approaches. Yellow is that perhaps my agency has done some planning or a little bit of piloting, or maybe your agency is in green and you're piloting and implementing. So we're going to open up the poll. If you could start voting, that would be great. And while you're voting, I might just say that, you know, those of you that have participated in previous learning communities, maybe you've been in the bundled services learning community and you've piloted some things around service integration or combining a couple of approaches. Well, you might be in the yellow because of the previous work that you've done. Some of you who have been a part of other kinds of communities of practice that are working on 2Gen might even be up in the green. So I know that from my travels around the country, we have agencies all over this this scope. And some will be red, some will be yellow, some will be green. Okay, I see the votes are coming in now, and if you can just go ahead and finish voting. It looks like we have quite a number of people that are finished, so maybe we'll go ahead and close that poll. And we're calculating the responses now. Takes just a couple of minutes. We're used to everything being instantaneous, but not quite like that yet. All right, and what we have with the poll results, looks like 33 folks voted for red, 24 for yellow, and we had 22 for green. So it's kind of a nice distribution across each of the different levels. So that's encouraging. All right. Okay, well, we'll keep moving here. I mentioned the high flyers in our tiered approach to support, and I just wanted to really, you know, I think many of you are familiar that Tulsa Community Action Project in Oklahoma, their 2Gen approach is really focused on Head Start, and their parent piece is supported by the Health Professionals Opportunity Grant. And so they're providing early childhood education and then employment for parents in the health professions field, and they get trained to secure those jobs. And then Garrett County Community Action in Maryland, also using Head Start as a platform. They provide job coaching. There's a partnership with the community college to do training, and then they have a lot of financial empowerment as part of their model. So we have 2 community action agencies that have, you know, gone before you, and we'll be calling on them and their learning in the coming months. And then the other group of peers I wanted to just highlight for folks is that the White House Rural Impact site. There are 10 White House Rural Impact demonstrations, and 5 of those are community action agencies, and they're listed here. All folks who are working on 2-generation approaches in rural places. Okay, so with that, we're please just, I see a lot of questions coming in, and I know Zandy is kind of looking at those, and we'll talk about those as we move forward. And here's a question I see right off. How are the existing high flyers and rural impact sites currently funded? Is there more info on their whole family approach and services? Well, there is more info. The partnership has a great brief out about both of those projects, and you can see that in the Learning Community Resource Center. So I would say go look at that brief. And then both of those places use a mix of funding, and they really have been very successful at blending and braiding different resources to support their efforts. But that's the kind of thing we'll be talking about more together in our work. So I'm going to hand it over to Tiffany, hand it back to Tiffany to kind of get us thinking about the learning communities, and then we'll answer some of your additional questions and talk a little bit more about selection criteria and applying.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jeannie. And so at this time, I'd like to just take a little bit of time to just offer some additional information about the Learning Communities Resource Center itself. And we really see our purpose as analyzing community action outcomes and identifying effective and promising and innovative practices that ultimately alleviate both the causes and the conditions of poverty. The LCRC, we very much see ourselves as a learning hub for the entire CSBG network, and really are set up in a way that we would be able to help agencies identify, adapt, and implement those innovative and evidence-informed family level as well as community level approaches to maximizing anti-poverty outcomes. And really the short way of saying that is that we are about the business of building the network capacity to fight poverty more effectively. And so let's now talk a little bit about how the learning community is structured. It is composed of both learning community groups, which we call LCGs, and communities of practice, which we refer to as COPs, and all of those are connected to various anti-poverty topics. Each of the members of the LCGs will focus on the selected topic areas. There's an opportunity, particularly within the intensive learning community groups, which I'll say a little bit more about, and our communities of practice for agencies to work on specific agency goals and programmatic enhancement. Through the learning community, we also offer technical assistance and lots of training. There's a connection to peer as well as subject matter experts from the human services industry to support the knowledge building process. And really the way I like to think about the learning community is in a lot of ways we serve as an incubator or a laboratory of innovation as it relates to those services, activities, practices, strategies that would advance the accomplishment of anti-poverty outcomes. And eventually, those successes that are achieved by agencies and those lessons learned will be shared with the entire network so that we might continue to reproduce that learning, and to do so in a rapid fashion for our ultimate benefit. And the final point that I will make about that is our end game is that we are engaged in this constant process of transformation or change as the needs of our families and our communities are constantly changing and very complex in nature. And so as we look at our next slide, it just provides you with an overview of our year one framework for the learning community. And here you can see various levels of engagement. In particular, as you look at that larger circle, it really speaks about all of the kinds of things that we will do through the learning community that is turned outward to everyone, that is accessible to everyone in the CSBG network. And that includes our national webinar series, resource sharing, peer learning, and technical assistance. In addition just to those outwardly turned activities or engagement, we also have some additional levels of engagement or connection to the learning community. And it starts with our open learning community groups, which are groups that focus on a specific topic area and are offered through our national webinar series as short-term series that span anywhere from 3 to 6 months. Then we have our intensive learning community groups, whereby agencies apply and are accepted to those groups, and in that have access to all the things that I have just mentioned previously, but also have an opportunity to work on some specific goals or outcomes that connect in with the improvement of services or the establishment of new initiatives to advance those anti-poverty outcomes. And within the context of those intensive learning community groups, agencies will have access to subject matter expertise, opportunities for regular peer-to-peer meetings, and also lots of technical support related to their goal planning process that relates to their goals that they will be working on in implementation. The next level of engagement within the learning community is our communities of practice, which Jeannie has already spoken a bit about, and so I won't speak about that any further, but say that the participants in the communities of practice have access to everything that I have just referenced in terms of the other levels of engagement, plus they have access to one-on-one coaching and access to the data interoperability initiative. So as we look at our next slide, it provides you with sort of how the various groups are categorized based on the levels of engagement. So I've talked about our open learning community groups, which are 3 to 6 months in duration, and within our open learning community groups, we have the health intersections, decreasing family homelessness, results at the community level, and cultivating data-centered organizations. Then as we look at our intensive learning community groups, which are 12-month engagements, agencies have an opportunity to participate in our integrated services to improve impact, our financial empowerment for families, and a whole family approach to economic mobility from poverty, or our whole family approach LCG. And I will call out, if you look at the ones that are bolded, the integrated services to improve impact and our whole family approach LCG, they are very much sort of connected or integrated in with the work of our community action economic mobility initiative. And so in a lot of ways, what those groups are doing will synergize and speak to one another and overlap, and we will bring a lot of attention to leveraging the knowledge building and the learning that takes place across those various groups. And then under communities of practice, you've already heard about our whole family approach, community of practice and rural impact. And so I won't further elaborate on those, but as you look at our next slide, it just gives you just an at-a-glance view of the kinds of activities or, what will happen across open, intensive learning community groups, as well as our communities of practice. And so you can sort of see the comparison across all 3 of our levels of engagement. And so then as we look at our next slide, I'd like to take a moment to talk a little bit about the process for our intensive learning community groups. As I mentioned earlier, that engagement is a year-long engagement, and during the first 6 months of the engagement, we primarily focus on formation and knowledge building, and then the latter 6 months will focus on implementation and practice transformation. And then, so as we look at our next slide, it says framework components. And so as we have our agencies progressing through that process, but supporting them in that process within our framework are topics that we've heard before that we will continue to sort of interlace into the fabric of what we do with the agencies in that process, and it includes connecting to data collection, data reporting, data analysis, our results-oriented and management accountability system, our national performance indicators, the annual reporting, how that kind of plays out, And then also family-centered coaching. We will give particular emphasis to racial equity as well as trauma-informed approaches. And so we see all of those various topics as vital to, providing that texture and that support needed for agencies in the process related to their selected topic areas. And so with that said, I'm going to hand back off to my colleague Jeannie, who's going to talk a little bit more about our specific engagement.
Yep. Thanks, Tiffany. So Tiffany did a great job of sort of highlighting that we really are trying to get a synergy across several of these learning opportunities. And so in the area of intensive learning communities, we have two of those, as you've just seen, and one is on integrated services to improve impact. And I think the important thing to note about this learning community is there are a lot of ways you can integrate services. You can integrate services across your agency for, everyone coming in. You can have no wrong door. You can do coordinated intake and assessment and that kind of thing. Or you can integrate for a specific target population, like maybe folks who are reentering the community, veterans or seniors. And so there's a lot of different ways that integration can look. And so this particular learning community will focus on integration of services. And, I've already mentioned data is sometimes an issue. Or reorganization, structural issues, those will be the kinds of things that we take up in this particular learning community. On the next slide, we highlight the other learning community that's intensive, which is the whole family approach to economic mobility from poverty. This is different from the service integration in that we will particularly focus on integration for parents and children and more of the two-gen whole family approach. And folks who are grappling with learning about that and perhaps piloting some things, if it's specifically for parents and children, then you'd want to apply for this learning community. And then finally, I've already mentioned some of the aspects of what folks will receive if they join the community of practice. But this is just folks that have maybe already made some changes in their organization. Maybe they already have developed a theory of change, or they've already thought through how they might integrate data for parents and children, and that level of engagement would be more suited to agencies in the community of practice. And just sort of going to jump over, we've talked a little bit about role impact, a couple of slides. That's good, thank you. Tiffany mentioned that rural impact is what we consider a community of practice, and that's been underway for several years. As I mentioned, there are 5 community action agencies in rural impact. That enrollment is closed. That's not anything anybody can apply for, but we want to make sure that we're speaking to the work that our colleagues are doing in that effort. So I think it might help if we sort of put up the next slide. I think it does a good job of sort of going back to this idea of we have agencies that are interested, agencies that are piloting, agencies that are implementing. If you're in the red or yellow, you should probably think about the whole family approach learning community, or maybe even the service integration learning community perhaps. And then if you're in the yellow and green, you should perhaps think about the whole family approach community of practice. So hopefully that helps folks kind of situate where they might fall, and when you start talking about how you apply, you have a better sense of what you might want to apply for. Tiffany's going to talk about some features of these opportunities. We've done some of that, but we'll highlight some other things, and then we'll talk a little bit more about a criteria and applying.
Thank you very much. And so just to say a little bit more about our significant features, and so you can count on regular webinars that are expert-led webinars being facilitated throughout the project across the various topic areas that are mentioned. And so we are targeting Wednesdays for those. We're calling those Webinar Wednesdays. And so go ahead and mark your calendars now for 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, and you can just find that wonderful learning and knowledge building opportunity from the learning community. Additionally, there are several publications that have been developed and have been released by the LCRC team. Our most recent series is our Anti-Poverty Practice series that really relates to several of the topic areas that we are offering learning community engagements around, and we encourage you to check those publications out. And in addition to that, Jeannie referenced a publication that we published somewhere around 2 years ago related to 2G that featured Garrett County Community Action Committee as well as CAP Tulsa. That publication is called Uplifting the Family. All of those publications are available on the partnership website, and you can look forward to additional publications that we will be releasing in the months to come. We are, like right now, at about 11 new publications that we have written and that are under development at this time. We will also offer technical assistance opportunities for the network, and so whether an agency is participating in one of our open learning community engagements or the others, there are various levels of technical assistance that agencies can access, and always, if there are specific or unique needs that agencies have, they can contact our team, and we offer customized support related to our various anti-poverty approaches. We are also featuring a new learning platform, a learning management system called Community Action Academy, which is housed through the Moodle online portal or system. For our open learning community groups, there's an opportunity for what we call affinity group engagements, which give agencies optional opportunities to engage in some peer-to-peer sharing as well as conversations with with subject matter experts. And then we've already talked about our communities of practice. And finally, the LCRC team will continue to provide technical support to state associations and our CSBG lead agencies as they support local agencies and state-based initiatives related to our various topic areas. And so then as we look at the timeline on the next slide, the application for joining the learning community is officially live. It went live last Thursday, and we would like to just emphasize for you that those applications are due on January the 12th of 2018, and very soon after that deadline, our open learning community groups will launch. I want to stress that every agency or every individual who applies to be in the open learning community groups will be accepted. However, as it relates to our intensive LCGs and our communities of practice, that will be a competitive selective process, and those groups will launch in February. And as you look at the timeline here on the next slide, it just provides you with an overview of our schedule of activities in February and March related to our orientation webinars, webinar Wednesdays, our monthly meetings for our intensive and communities of our intensive LCGs and our communities of practice. As I mentioned, we will be engaging in some goal planning, which is a tool that connects to Roma principles, and so agencies will have assignments related to that. The communities of practice or community of practice will work on its theory of change development, as you can see on the schedule there. And Jeannie has already mentioned our Whole Family Institute, which is an in-person institute which will take place in June of 2018. At the same time that the Rural Impact Final convening will take place as well. And then it is in February of 2019 that the community of practice that they will begin their year 2 of activity. And so with that said, let me just very quickly talk a little bit about what the perspective, what the configuration needs to be. One is we are expecting that agencies would apply as a team for our intensive learning community groups as well as our community of practice, and there's a requirement of a minimum of 3 agency persons to be represented on those teams, and at least one person on the team should include decision makers, program staff, data analysis staff. However, the team doesn't have to be limited to that 3, and so you might choose to involve other members of your agency or local partners or your state association. You can decide on how to sort of build out your internal working team related to your learning community group engagement. But the final thing I will say is that this opportunity is available to the entire the entire Community Action Network. And so let's take a minute to look at the benefits. As a result of participating in the learning community, agencies and the network will yield several benefits, which include dedicated space to learn from peers and to share best practices, specialized technical assistance, which we have mentioned, networking opportunities with local and national funders. That's a wonderful opportunity. Resources to build staff and program capacity, enhance program strategies, and improved outcomes. That improved outcomes piece is a big deal to us at the partnership, and certainly from the perspective of OCS, and opportunities to contribute knowledge to the Community Action Network. And so while agencies have the opportunity to receive, at the same time that they're receiving and learning, the expectation is that we're always giving back as we are doing that in that process. And so should your agency participate in the learning community, and our response to that is absolutely yes. So if we look at the next slide, team members will convene virtually or in person. We've kind of already spoken to that, and I'll just reinforce that for the community of practice, the duration of their engagement is 18 months, whereas for our intensive learning community groups, that engagement is 12 months, and our open learning community groups is a 3 to 6 month engagement. And so now it is my pleasure to hand off to a wonderful agency, which is Mid-Iowa Community Action. They were one of our participating sites in the Rural Impact Project, which you all have already heard about. It is my pleasure to introduce Clarissa Thompson, who is going to share a bit about what her experience was like as a participant in that community of practice. Clarissa? Can't hear you yet, so let's try it again. So there may be some technical difficulty that I am hearing. Right. Clarissa, can you hear us? All right, and so while we're trying to address that, we are going to just move forward in our presentation, and I'll hand back off to Jeannie, who will talk a little bit more about criteria and selection. And if time permits, we'll give Clarissa an opportunity to come back. Jeannie?
Thank you, Tiffany. Good plan. Okay, so we just wanted to talk for a minute, and I know we've had some questions about criteria. And Tiffany already mentioned that we're looking for teams of the agencies to participate in an LCG or the community of practice. And we are asking that we need to have agency leadership to be a part of these. And so each team needs to have strong leadership from their local agency. There needs to be evidence that they have interest in the focus area that they're applying for, whether it's an LCG or community of practice. Related to community of practice, we would like to see there that agencies have piloted activities, programs, or strategies, and have some advanced knowledge and experience of service integration or bundling or whole family two-generation services. The next slide sort of lays out some of the other criteria and sort of reframes some of that. So there'll be 10 to 15 agencies selected to participate in each learning community group, and then 10 agencies for the community of practice. When you take a look at the application, you'll see one of the ways that we're documenting that there is leadership support is each agency has to have a commitment letter from the executive director. And then we really want agencies to think about who their home team, who their team will be participating. We need folks on the team who can participate in the activities that we've mentioned and who can then take that information back to your team at the agency and help them think through what it means for change. Okay, and so that's a little bit about criteria. There is an application process, and we're going to talk about that before we leave you this afternoon. But I think we might have Mid-Iowa back on the phone. And so we just wanted to, you know, have an opportunity for you to hear from a peer who's been participating in a community of practice and what that looked like for them. So Clarissa, are you there? Okay, you might be muted, Clarissa. It looks like on the system your phone line is muted. Are you there, Clarissa?
Hear us now?
Oh yeah, perfect. Wonderful.
Okay, yeah, sorry about that. We are very excited to share about our experience as part of the learning community and the community of practice with rural impact. And specifically, Tiffany and Jeannie asked us to talk about our experience with coaching and peer learning. And from the beginning, we were assigned a coach to kind of help us keep us on track and really provide input and feedback to our planning. And, you know, our experience is telling us that that was a really good thing to do. We had a perfect match in our coach who had relevant experience of what we were working towards and was able to listen to where we were at in the process and advise us appropriately. But one thing that we also had with the coaching was that she really helped us see our own success. Oftentimes we would be sitting in our call kind of wondering what we were going to really talk about, and by the end we were feeling like we had really accomplished a lot, just having that focus opportunity to really share what we were doing. As far as the peer learning, you know, being together with 9 other organizations working on this project is extremely beneficial and important. In the beginning, it takes a little time to figure out how your experience is relevant to the folks that you're working with, especially when there's different states involved and different programs. But once you decipher through all that, you're really able to see your commonalities and also where you are with experience. You can see agencies that have been where you are now and see agencies where you're headed, and also see agencies of where you've been, and really be able to see that trajectory of change that you want to go through. And not to mention, it's just developing another group of people that you can connect with, and when you are having questions or need more support or things like that.
You know, this is Arlene McAtee, and I would also add that when you're working with other people who are trying to do a very similar kind of approach to working with families, there is the benefit, too, of watching them do things that you can kind of analyze and get information about and know, well, wait, that's not for us. So that you don't go down a path or start spending time on something that maybe isn't going to work for your area, either because it didn't work for them and you're in a similar situation or a similar point in your development, or it's just that you can see that in our agency we don't have sufficient resources to do that now, or we don't have the capacity within our staff to do that now. And I found that to be very valuable too. There was never a session we went to, where I didn't walk away feeling like I was better equipped to think through our next steps and to implement those next steps. And like Clarissa said, knowing that there are other people who've been where you've been and can help you see what the future looks like, or who are with you where you are, who can help you think through things is extremely helpful. And you can't really, when you're sitting in Marshalltown, Iowa, very easily find those people and sort through all that and make those determinations.
So I think we'll give it back to Jeannie.
Yeah, so very much, Clarissa, as well as Arlene McAtee, who is the Executive Director of Mid-Iowa Community Action. So we really appreciate that perspective. And so as we move forward to conclude today's session, we thought it important to let you know about how to join the learning community. As we have already mentioned, the application deadline is January 12, 2018. We would like to invite you to go to the Community Action Partnership website, www.communityactionpartnership.com. There you will find additional information on the Learning Community Application Package, which we encourage you to read in total, as well as there is a video on how to utilize the Moodle system or the Community Action Academy system. And up on your screen, you see the URL that you just need to utilize to take you straight into that system. You will end up needing to set up a user account in Moodle, and once you set that up, it will really provide you with the step-by-step guidance that you need to engage in to begin to complete your actual application. For persons who will be signing up to join our intensive learning community groups, as well as our community of practice, there will be forms, commitment forms that have to be signed off by the executive director at your agency, as well as in the case of the community of practice, a logic model, and the Moodle system will allow for you to do that. If you have any questions around how to apply, or if you experience any technical difficulties, feel free to contact our team. We'll show you the slide that has that information on who to contact from our team. One person in particular you can reach out to is Courtney Kohler. Her email address will be on the slide deck that we will provide you with. In conclusion, I will say that today's presentation, the recording, as well as the slide deck, will be placed online at the Community Action Partnership website, as well as the LCRC blog, and so look out for that, and we very much hope that you will join the learning community. At this time, we're going to check to see if there are any final questions that we need to respond to before closing.
Tiffany, I saw a question that was from a state association, and they were saying, is this just for community action agencies, or can state associations apply? And I know you had several state associations that participated in the Learning Communities group last go-around, and certainly they could this go-around. I think for the community of practice, we're looking for community action agencies. But we've already talked to several state associations who want to be supportive of their agencies that may end up in the community of practice. So I think there's a lot of engagement, several different levels for state associations, and Tiffany and I are happy to talk to any state association folks about that. Yep. I think we already addressed that question, Zandy. Was there? I also saw something about just printing the application. Was there a question about that? Can the application be printed so that we can work collaboratively? If not, can we save it in SurveyMonkey?
Yeah, and so the questions that are contained on the actual SurveyMonkey application are available in the PDF document that's called the Learning Community Application Package. So that gives you an opportunity to be very reflective about that before going into SurveyMonkey. In addition to that, we'll have to check. I can't remember if there's a feature that allows them to just print a PDF. You can print each page as you progress through those pages in SurveyMonkey, but what I'll emphasize is we intentionally put all of the essay questions or discussion questions that you would have to answer in the PDF document that is the application package, so that you would know in advance of going into SurveyMonkey what you needed to provide in that process.
Tiffany, there's also a question here about what distinguishes the integrated services learning community group from the whole family learning community group. And I think first, they're both learning community groups, so the process will be very similar in that there'll be national webinars, there'll be a peer group, an affinity group that folks will participate in both of those, and they'll be learning and setting goals and practicing and piloting something. I think the difference in topic is that the whole family group will focus on integration, coordination, and for parents and children together. Yes. So how do you coordinate services to help parents and children move up and out of poverty, versus the integrated services group is more about integrating for across your whole customer base, or maybe for a particular target group that's not families. So my example about that is veterans or prisoner reentry. Sure. You could think about coordinated service delivery or service integration with a group other than parents and children. And so if you're at your agency and you're trying to think about how to better serve veterans, then you might want to apply for the service integration group. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, there's a bit of overlap there, because in the integrated services space, you're going to be able to learn a little bit more about what bundles work more effectively, let's say, for example, related to reentry or veterans families. And you could have families, yes, who meet those profiles, right? Right? And so as you think about that whole family approach, you know, there's already sort of that knowledge that individuals would be able to access, or agencies would be able to access, to kind of inform how they might provide those customized bundles for parents and children, you know, in that whole family space. I think that example sort of shows that if folks are trying to think through some of these things, they should reach out to us by phone or email, and we can help them think through which group might be the most beneficial, because we want folks to get to the group that, you know, they can have the best learning. And then there's also a question about, is there an open LCG around the whole family approach? And I would say that there's not, but so many of the webinars and the knowledge building items that we do will be open, whether you're in the learning community or the community of practice. And if you're following the Learning Community Resource Center, you'll get information about those open groups. You can also look in the Resource Center and see when webinars and information are posted. And then when we do things at the conferences or, you know, the management and leadership training, you know, those kind of things will be open. So in a big way, I think certainly there are open opportunities if you're not in an LCG or the community practice.
Absolutely. We're trying to turn as much of that information as outward as much as possible is what I would say. And then with our Whole Family Institute, while we are certainly targeting members of our community of practice and our intensive learning community groups, there is an opportunity for agency teams to apply for the Whole Family Institute, and so don't rule that possibility out for yourself.
I think that might be all the questions.
Well, Thank you all so much for joining in today's webinar. Once again, we hope you will join us. And if there are any questions or any needs that you have related to the application process, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We are here for you. Thank you for your time today. Make it a great day. This concludes our webinar.